peace to our LISC community and beyond. As we come into this space, let's just take a moment to acknowledge how incredible it is to have 3 Indigenous women on a national panel to discuss something really important. I just want to say happy Native Heritage Month to everyone, and to my Choctaw family, Halito Chimichikama, which for those of you who don't know, just means, hey, how you doing? My name is Shauntrice Martin, and I am the program Officer of Economic Development for LISC Louisville. LISC Louisville is the newest LISC office, and I trust folks are doing well. Back in the 90s, when I was in elementary school, the U.S. had its first Native Heritage Month, and since then it's been celebrated across the country, despite legislation attempting to kind of suppress cultural education. We've been able to continue to thrive. And today I'm really excited to be joined by some powerful women who are making big moves in the LISC network. First is LeAnn Littlewolf. She is the co-executive director of the American Indian Community Housing Organization and has worked for 3 decades in advocacy, direct services, and community leadership. We also have Maria del Carmen Parra, and she is the co-founder and executive director of the Cihuapactli collective, and they recently celebrated their 7th anniversary, so congratulations. Thank you both for joining me in this virtual space. Today's conversation, we're really going to get into a lot of the initiatives you all are working on, but we also want to invite all of our listeners, all of our viewers to get involved. You can visit both of their websites through LISC, and let's get into it. So first, it's a blessing to have you all on this panel. I want to know from both of you, what resonates with you most about Native Heritage Month?
So just good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're at. Mishpansilko Nawayolke, no toca Maria Chaneke Parracano, Tosekamati Bueno Nancy no Tatsin. So just wanting to give a greeting to everyone. And then also, I think for me, as Indigenous people, I feel like this is us daily, you know? I think there is an acknowledgement of this month, but this is which is great as well. But I also feel like we're constantly in this struggle to be seen, you know, and to be acknowledged that we're still here, and that a lot of the work that we do, and I'm so excited to hear about LeAnn's work, and so I feel like it continues, you know. We're still here. We're resilient peoples, but then we're still here trying to advocate and try to be vocal about what our communities need.
Absolutely. Thank you. LeAnn?
Well, yeah, I'd like to just do like a traditional introduction to, just so everyone knows who I am. But Indisogijik Indigo, Ingan Indu Dame, and Gazaga Spajame Cogna Unjiba, and Anishinaabe Kwe Inda. So my traditional name is Everyday, and I belong to the Wolf Clan, and I come from Leech Lake Tribal Nation, and I'm a Anishinaabe woman. And I think like Native Heritage Month it's a chance for us to celebrate, and it's a chance for us to lift up the strengths that we have in our community. And I think that when I was a kid, that my dad always talked to me about what it means to be Ojibwe, and sharing with me and my sister and my brothers like our family history. And like I learned so much from that, but I didn't have that in school. And so I was lucky that we had Indigenous education programs at some of the schools that I went to that helped me understand like that history further. But I feel like this month is like a chance for us to really gather that information and like lift it up and celebrate it. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm in awe of both of your work. I said before we hit record that I don't want to fangirl too much, but there's incredible work happening. Like you all probably, I grew up with a big family, including my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother all in the same house. So I was blessed to get that history that we didn't get in school. So your insights really speak to me, LeAnn, and I'm gonna quote you from one of my favorite interviews that I read. All of the answers are in our culture. The path forward is in our origin story. We do economic development, but we do it in an Indigenous way. Can you talk to me a little bit about where that came from and what that means for you and your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of my story around doing economic development actually starts with my work as an advocate training specialist working in sexual violence and domestic violence like advocacy. So I spent a year doing research and like looking at all of this data around like the experiences of violence, the multiple experiences of violence that our community members have throughout our lives, from like children to elders. And I, you know, my job at that time was to develop training to help community providers be more responsive. So I'm doing all this research and I'm seeing all of this like just generational trauma, and then I, knowing my own history and like the historic trauma, I'm like, I was deeply struggling with this question of how do we change that. And so my conclusion was that we have to change economic conditions. I mean, there's so many things that we need to change, but if we don't change economic conditions, we're not going to change all of these other really negative things that we're experiencing that we should not be experiencing. And so we created a position called Economic Development Director at my organization, and we launched social enterprises. But everything that I read about entrepreneurship, I read all the books, I attended trainings, and there's this like mindset or this narrative around you should sacrifice everything for your business. Even your business comes before your family, and you should work 24/7, and you should do that. And you know, so there's like a real narrative around what an entrepreneur looks like and what they do. And so in my community, that doesn't work. Our families, our community come first. Everything that we do is integrated with our community and our people. And then so I needed to take a different approach, and our team took a different approach, and we started looking at, okay, well, what are our cultural strengths? In our origin story, there's a lot of strength in that story about well, I want to tell the whole story, but I'm not going to. But our stories have so much power in them. And so this like origin story for the Anishinaabe people gave us insight on the direction that we needed to do our economic development, which is about gathering resources. And like, even though you're little and you think that you might not be able to do it, you have to try. And so it was that kind of like energy and that kind of spirit that guided our work. And we were like a little tiny nonprofit, and we're like, we're just going to go for it, and we're going to try some things, and we're going to do it from our cultural perspective, and we're going to base our work in the things that matter to us. So that's our food, our indigenous food. And so we started doing food sovereignty work. It's our arts and culture. We have a really robust artist community, and they have like helped our social service programming really grow, and our community programming really grow. And so then we started to work in collaboration to grow economic social enterprise, and then affordable housing, so homes. So.
And it sounds you're doing the work to right wrongs that don't belong to you, right? These are things that are structural, that have happened, that you didn't cause, but you're working to fix. And I have to say, it's impressive the amount that you've been able to far, and I look forward to even more. So just to switch to Maria. So when I first of all read Rest as Resistance, I already knew I was in the right place on your website, because that's something that can be a luxury for people of color in general, but Indigenous folks specifically, because we're constantly proving, number one, that we still exist, number two, that we matter, and that we're important enough to factor into legislation and factor into education. So can you tell me about the pillar of your collective that discusses cultural revitalization? And, can you describe that for people who may have not heard that term before?
Yes. Well, the Cihuapactli Collective is a group that and community really that represents urban Indigenous families. And so being in an urban setting in Arizona, which has 21 federally recognized tribes, but last year alone, we served over 55 nations, just with people being just identified as Indigenous people, and that really just shows that we're it's a hub, Phoenix is a hub for all different people's migration, naturally human migration that has come through here traditionally. And in the Southwest, you have a lot of cultural knowledge, that sometimes is not always shared, or acknowledged really, publicly. And so for the Cihuapactli Collective, when we started, it was very much from a distress call put out postpartum from a mother, and that was me. I'm postpartum mom who needed support after I had just lost my mom, my mother, and I had my second child, and I was like, what am I gonna do with the second kid? Like I wasn't sure what to do. And I'm one of 11, children. And so for me, it was also like, how can we, many of us that helped start and founded the collective had all known each other from different ceremonial backgrounds, different ceremonies, different communities. And so a lot of us, we having that foundation, that spiritual connection, the sense of community was really important for us. And so with that was, what do we need for ourselves to be able to heal our communities? I personally, what did I need to help heal that aspect? And what did I need at the time? And it really was community, being able to tell other mothers, like, I need support at the time. I need, I need help just with managing the day-to-day at that time. And now we know the importance of even mental health and the aspect of healing when it comes to that as when we're doing, as Indigenous parents. And so, but I'm sharing this because I feel like the cultural revitalization component fits within all of this. All of our work is focused on that ceremonial foundation, on those Indigenous teachings that we've had from different backgrounds, different circles, different communities. But then also acknowledging like that one of the things that we say with the collective is we move at the pace of our children. We move at the pace of our families. And so really honoring that as our children grow, we've seen the collective grow, and so every time it's, what does our community need now? What do we need right now? How can we then plan, so I really like hearing LeAnn's, what she shared about her work, because I feel like it's very similar, we do very similar work, doing it to what is best representative of our communities, right? And we also are guided by an advisory council of elders. So, and that's from different nations, different peoples. And so very much thinking of how do we integrate culture being at the root of everything. From gardening to our food, I'm an Indigenous foods chef. So then it's also, how do I incorporate the teachings of my lineage and my family to then share with everybody else in the community? How can we then reintroduce Indigenous plants back to how they were here in the landscape of Phoenix? And how do we use them? And how do we harvest them? And how do we honor them, in a respectful way? How can we access our seeds again? Different things like that, different medicines and all of this to help in our healing process from postpartum or getting ready to birth to the kids knowing what to use as ointments or topical, to use topically. And, I love that the kids are, I'm sure you saw a little head moving around here, and we're parents, and so our children are always around us, and we always try to, for me, I have 3 daughters, and they call themselves the 3 sisters, so we know in the garden what that means, the beans, the corn, and squash, and they're funny, they fight over which one they are, and so I feel like culture and the cultural revitalization is going back to them recognizing for my children, their names. What do their names mean? And helping educate community. What do their names mean? Why do they wear their hair a certain way? Why do they wear certain clothes at a certain time? And for us, we're open to share, as much with, we're open to it. And then also our ceremonies, our dances, our coming of age ceremonies, and what have you, is like the culture is always interwoven in all the work that we do. And we're always thinking of how can we then best, and doing it in a respectful way, honoring those ancestors that have shared all this knowledge with us, the elders that are still in community, but then also leaving the landscape, knowing that our kids feel comfortable in who they are and who they are, being part of the community, and knowing that they're not the only ones too. There's other kids, there's other families that they connect with, and at so many different levels.
I love that. My heart is so full just listening to you talk, because you're doing what should already have been done. And so a lot of what you're doing is the sort of economic development that, the entire country should be doing, but, eventually we'll get there. Just to shift a little bit, I don't know if you all have heard of Shanto Energy. It's in New Mexico, led by the Navajo Nation. A lot of what they do is, I think it's cutting edge. So essentially, Shanto Energy is a mobile solar plant, and it was started by Brett Isaac, who is the Shanto CDC Renewable Energy Project Manager. This is something that's done in a way that hasn't been done before. And so my question to both of you, either of you can answer first, is as LISC has been a big supporter of CDCs across our impact area, what role do you see CDCs playing in that sort of cultural revitalization and creative placemaking, specifically for groups that have been underrepresented historically?
So so community development corporations.
Yes.
Is that, yes. Would, I think that the role could be like, well, one is that there's room for creativity, and that there's a way to like really approach this work in a different way. And so you can design, you can put cultural design into the work. And I've seen like, in our work, we learn a lot from others. So we traveled to go visit other community. We went to see some Thunder Valley CDC, and they invited us into their community, and I learned so much on that trip, like where they brought us in and we learned about how they're doing renewable agriculture, and they're doing organic farming, and then they're doing housing, home ownership, but they're also designing the homes to be climate prepared. And they're doing that with input from the community about what kind of design the home should actually look like. And then to a immersion program that started as a daycare and then moved into elementary. And so I think what was interesting to me is like the historic context is that CDC is on Pine Ridge Reservation, which is tribal lands, but the nonprofit needed to buy the fee service land. And so it's also that history of like how federal policies have impacted our peoples, and our reserved lands were allotted, and so that we don't retain a lot of our traditional, homelands in that way. And so I think that there's a lot of room there for creativity. And I think that culturally speaking, that we just intuitively bring ourselves to the work. And so then we approach the work. We like at AICHO, we were awarded a national award for creative placemaking. We were like, great. And then later we were like, we didn't really know what that meant. So great. Well, then we intuitively were doing all these elements of creative placemaking. So we looked it up, and I was like, oh yeah, we do all of that. And so I think that's what I would offer.
Thank you so much. It often, if you're already doing the work you're supposed to be doing, others will follow. So I love that. A little bit heavier question. I know that in recent years, we've had a lot of development and progress. Specifically, Indigenous voices are being amplified in more spaces, whether it's classrooms, boardrooms, behind the camera, like one of my favorite shows, Reservation Dogs. And there, has been a lot, especially when you compare, say, the cast of Reservation Dogs to when Sasheen did her speech, right, about just how underrepresented we are and how poorly represented we are. Sasheen Littlefeather gave an Oscar speech in place of Marlon Brando when he denied the Oscar. So we still have a long way to go, especially when we consider how many missing Indigenous women there are across the country. So Native Heritage Month for me is especially important because a lot of those stories go unheard of to the general population in mainstream media, and we're ignored. So in addition to just recognition, what are other ways that advocates can get involved and uplift the work that your organizations are doing? And we'll start with LeAnn and then go to you, Maria.
Well, there's so many different ways, but I guess the one thing that I want to talk about too is like I had started to talk a little bit about land access and about just understanding the history. A lot of people don't understand tribal history, and there's not a lot of built relationship with tribal nations. I see that that has started to change in the last like couple of decades in my region. But before, tribal nations were not always like the first group that people would think of for partners. And I also work in an urban area. We're in Duluth, and so we're on the western tip of Lake Superior in a city that's about 86,000 people. And we have a lot of Anishinaabe, Ojibwe people, but we have many nations represented in our community. And so it's being mindful of the different, how far some people are from their homelands. Also that there's many different cultural practices and histories to know about and to honor. And yet we are united as a people, as peoples, right? Knowing that our communities have experienced many of the same things in different ways. So I think just paying attention to those distinctions and being curious about that and wanting to know more, because that's how you can understand the community context. So I was fortunate to be able to go to a food sovereignty conference in 2017. I felt really privileged to be able to go, to have resources to go and to be in that space. And being there, it changed my life, because when I saw the health of the people that were there, and the how welcoming and how kind and how I was treated as a relative, I heard all the stories about people who had maintained their growing or gathering practices over many generations, that goes hundreds and hundreds of years back, to people who had, because of the policies and the cultural disruptions that we've experienced, have been disconnected, and who are coming back and they are reestablishing, or they're relearning or reclaiming that knowledge. I was like, this is the answer. This is, if we were going to do like economic development, this is the direction to go, because it's not only about economic wealth generation, but it's about community regeneration. And so I came back to my organization really excited about that, but then also because we're in an urban area, we have a rooftop where we have garden boxes, which we're really proud of. We grow vegetables and herbs, and we have traditional medicines on site. And it's a way we have a permanent supportive housing program where the families and the youth take care of those garden boxes, and they're the ones who really make that happen. And we're always so proud of that. And then I was looking at those garden boxes thinking, but that's the only land that we have to grow. And that is not right. So we started on this quest around like, how do we get more land access to grow more? And it led us to buy a corner grocery store. I mean, so it was a journey that we took, but we bought this corner grocery store that had been vacant for 2 years. And we're now developing it into the Niuan market, which will be an Indigenous food market, which will have affordable foods for the local neighborhood, which is a walking neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that has been historically like low resourced or under resourced, and everybody still walks. And when that corner grocery store is open, people would go there 3-4 times a day, because it was a community hub. And so this, our vision with Niuan Market is that it will still be that gathering space for people. It will have affordable foods, but then also it's going to lift up our Indigenous foods, which in many ways have been, people eat Indigenous foods every day and don't realize that they're eating Indigenous foods. And also we have some really specific foods that have very powerful, they're nutrient dense, and they have powerful story that comes with them. And then along with our foods comes our cultural practices that's a part of those foods. So the one thing that we learned when we opened our first social enterprise, Indigenous First, which is a art gallery and a gift shop, we started with a very small space, and we had about 30 Indigenous artists featured. But once we opened up that retail space and people had access to retail space, we just saw like all of these emerging entrepreneurs come out and say like, I never thought I could do this, but I have this like design idea. And then, we opened it in July 2017. It's 2022. We have 129 Indigenous artists, food producers, and entrepreneurs featured in that space now. And I think that's like the power of having access to space, and especially to retail space. So I wanted to, yeah, thank you for letting me share about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, I can't wait to share this all over our social media and everywhere I can, because it's incredible and it doesn't get celebrated enough. And the amount of work I know it must have taken to get it to that point is incredible. I know we haven't ever met in person, but I'm extremely proud of both of you for all this work. Maria?
Yes, thank you. And I think that's amazing. I'm glad you shared that. I'm also listening and like, oh, that's so great, and so just congratulations with all of that. I know it's been a lot of work. We know I know it's work. So for us, we've been trying to also from the very beginning, one of our goals was to support traditional and Indigenous birth workers, but also putting it in a perspective as a revenue generator or a business for them. And so we also provide small business training, and a lot of us are entrepreneurs in our own path. And so we've also just share from our knowledge and consult with folks about how to form an LLC, whether it's now also with our, where we have the second incorporated cooperative in the state of Arizona as well. So it's a food forest cooperative, which we also focusing on growing our own foods and being able to use that, learning from the pandemic, right? And also kind of reinforcing what we need as Indigenous peoples here. We need access to food, we need access to our medicines, we need access to land, kind of what you've already mentioned. And so we have 1 acre currently. We are working on trying to actually make our first real estate purchase as a collective as well, soon, maybe within the next few months, that has land with that as well. And to serve as a community hub for most people in South Phoenix, but then also hopefully soon being able to have access to 7 acres of land in the city to be able to continue growing there, and then also the development of a urban Indigenous wellness center that would then also include a teaching kitchen, help be a small business incubator as well. Potentially right now we're talking about whether it should be a birth center as well, because of the lack of accessibility for our urban Indigenous communities, especially in South Phoenix, as many of the hospitals or trauma centers, are far for at least 30 minutes drive in either direction for folks. And also the increased numbers of home births, but them having some type of support system in the community as well. So yeah, we're envisioning also some type of housing on the property as well, to be able to help not only house the farmers, those wanting to work the land. It could be potential birth workers. It could be potential unhoused community members, as well. So there's a lot of potential there that we're currently trying to establish. And then also with that is we do have a there is a cemetery on the property that we have been asked to be stewards of. And so being able to acknowledge those relatives that have been here since that cemetery itself is the last family person that we know was buried there in the early 1900s. And so and part of that, we also know that children were part of that aspect. And so this cemetery was owned by one landowner that owned most of South Phoenix. And so these were farm workers, these were people that worked at the land, and so we want to be able to uplift their stories and their families and honor them along with their work that they did. And that's really fitting to what our goals are there at the space. And so I feel like entrepreneurship, cultural revitalization, food systems, health systems, all of this is interwoven into the work of the collective, and how even instrumental this one piece of land could potentially be for a lot of community members in the area.
Yeah, I mean, 7 acres is no small thing. I know it can be incredible for the work you do. I've personally farmed about 3 or so acres at a time, and that's a lot. So I know 7 acres just have the potential to do so much. So my next question to both of you is, what can the average person who is listening to this do right now to support either you acquiring those 7 acres, with the food justice work that's happening for both your organizations? What is something we can do right now? And we'll start with Maria.
Sure, thank you. We do have so there's so many different things. The immediate thought is, well, the first thing is we have our collective birth fund, which is a rapid response fund for birthing families immediately impacted by the closure of the Phoenix Indian Medical Center. That closed its labor and delivery now maybe going on 2 years ago in October, this past October. But from one day to the next, they closed their labor and delivery unit and displaced hundreds of families. And so what we've done is we established a birth fund to help remedy some of that, their support birth workers to be able to help do a home birth or a support with the birth worker in a hospital setting or birth center setting. And then we also help also support the birth workers themselves who are, traditional birth workers don't really, all we traditionally know is just to support, right? And payment is not always expected. And so what we like to do is honor their time and honor their work and honor with their energy. And so we try to help support financially, through our birth fund as well. And so that's a source that people could donate to directly off of our website. We also, at our anniversary celebration, also launched our capital campaign for the 7 acres to be able to develop that. Yay! So we're just waiting to sign, which is exciting for us. And so being able to then develop it, already working with the developer right now to see what would that potentially look like as far as cost goes. And so that's something that we are looking to, our capital campaign will be just for that itself. And then also just volunteering even here locally in Phoenix. We have many different wellness series, different events. We put out notices on our social media whenever we're going to go harvest or wherever we need to do weeding or wherever there's always something to do. And then also we put out notices when there are things like when we need breast milk or when people in the community need type of food support, we put that out as well. So there's so many different ways. We usually post everything on our social media, on our website, and then also just personal, contact people. Anyone could contact us directly.
Beautiful. So if you are listening, watching, please, please, please go to the Cihuapactli Collective's website, follow them on social media. We'll be sharing a lot of their great work to help them continue and go beyond. LeAnn, what about you? What are ways that people can support right now?
Yeah, I'm going to try to see if can you read that? It says by native.
Yes.
So like the Minnesota Indigenous Business Alliance, it's a nonprofit, but they support Native entrepreneurship. And it's just like, anytime you can buy and support Native entrepreneurs, I would just say, like, please do that. And we have a social enterprise called Indigenous First. It has a website and you can shop online. It's art. There's so many beautiful things there. And there's also Indigenous foods. So, check out the things that the entrepreneurs are offering. They have a lot of creativity and they're very innovative and they just make really beautiful, beautiful items. And then we are developing the Niuean market. And so on our website, it's www.aicho.org. So that's our acronym AICHO. There's a page for our Niuean market, and then there's ways to support that. We're raising money right now for the renovation and the construction. So I think that those are some really great ways to kind of support this work. And then I think, again, just overall, like anytime you can learn about Indigenous economy and Indigenous entrepreneurs and lift them up, I think that just helps.
Absolutely. And I'm going to shout out a couple Indigenous creators. One is Native Girl by Bree Taylor. She makes shirts and lots of things. And also Mamuna Youssef is an Indigenous creator who was also a water protector. And she has a lot of things for sale. So we will try to drop as many Indigenous creators as possible. Please, please, please support these wonderful businesses. LeAnn, as she mentioned, has been able to engage with hundreds of business owners, creatives, folks who are doing incredible things. So please do not buy your native clothing from Target or any other place that does not have Indigenous creators creating. So yes, I'm really happy we get to share this space today. Let's see. I think the last thing we're going to talk about is how much work do you feel like you have to get to where you want to be? And I know that's a big answer, right? But what I want to know is it mostly what other people need to do or what we need to do within our own communities in order to get to that place where we are sustainable, we are supporting, and we're able to uplift the work? And this time we'll start with LeAnn.
I want to say it's both. I think that one is that we need to have good allies, and I think that there's a lot of resources out there, and we need access to those resources. We need equitable access to those resources. I also think that Indigenous communities have the high ability to self-determine our own futures, and that for a long time that's been taken away from us. And I think that we're building those skill sets. We have those skill sets. And I would say we need to set our own direction and start developing. And Maria said that culture is at the root of everything. And that's what we do. And so I think that that's what we need to see happen more. And then I think like our solutions might look different. So like when Maria is talking about our birthing center, I would love to have a birthing center here. And I think that that's a high need. And I don't know, like in other areas, if people would understand why that's so important, but we do. And like that would be make such a critical difference in the health and well-being of our community, to be able to bring life in our traditional way and to begin with those teachings. So that's what I would say. I'll pass it to Maria.
I also agree the combination of having the allies, also having people understand. Sorry about that. Having folks.
Oh, you're good. We love seeing the babies.
being able to understand. Say hi. Say hi. You want to be on a 4-year-old? But a good combination of even then relationship building, because that's what it really comes down to, is being able to have good relationships with folks that understand, for one, accessibility to resources, but then also giving the trust in that we know how to guide our communities forward, that we know the community, and being able to put those and willing to, for us to put our own parameters on things, as LeAnn said, our self-determination and knowing how to best use those funds. And another great thing that I've been seeing a lot of folks starting to catch up on is multi-year funding, not only just one grant that here you go, do what you can type thing, but long relationships and sustainable relationships, because we know this is not just a 1-year type of plan that we have. We look forward to the 7 generations. So whatever we could do to best position our communities moving forward, like these are the thoughts we have constantly of like, this is an everyday thing, and it's a long-term thing for us. It's life.
So yeah, that was the last question. You all have been incredible. This was my first one of these, and I hope not the last. I want to welcome everybody to continue to celebrate Native Heritage Month in November and beyond, because there is plenty to celebrate. So you'll be able to check out links to all their great work. I want to thank you, Maria and LeAnn. Again, I've learned so much, and I'm inspired by what you do. If you want to find out more, you can always go to LISC's website, follow us on social media, and I think that's it for us. So thank you both.
miigwech, and just really appreciate the chance to be here. And this was such a great conversation. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Pasok ka, Mati.